Good evening, Canada. How are you doing out there on this Wednesday evening? My name is Tyler Bieber, and I am the host of Rouge Radio. And tonight on the program, we have a good lineup. Later on will be Kent Ridley. And first, we have a surprise guest coming up here for you shortly for our CFL segment, and he will be Nik Lewis, the perennial all-star receiver for the Calgary Stampeders. And so we're going to connect with him in just a couple seconds here. We'll talk about the past week here in the CFL after we talk with Nik. Again, a perennial all-star receiver. Unfortunately, he went down with an injury earlier this season. Tough to see that happen, as it has been the case for many star players in the Canadian Football League this season, like Lewis. Ricky Ray just returned for the Toronto Argonauts. You've had Jamel Richardson, Anthony Calvillo. Just an unfortunate circumstance it has been with injuries, but that is why you have backup players, or as many teams are calling them, the next man up players. And so I believe we have Nik Lewis on the line here, and we're going to connect with him here.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Nik?
I'm good.
Thank you for taking the time to join me tonight.
Oh, no problem. How is it out there?
It's a little bit frigid, a little bit cold. You know how it is in October and heading towards November in Canada. It gets a little bit chilly. I assume you're in Texas?
No. I'm actually in Calgary right now.
Oh, okay. So as I was mentioning, you unfortunately had the injury earlier. You've never missed more than one game, or you've always been out for a short amount of time if you have been injured. I guess what I want to know is, how have you been dealing with the injury, overcoming the injury, and having to deal with being out for such a long amount of time?
Well, I've only missed 3 games due to injury in my 22 years of football, and one came in high school, and the other 2 were here in Calgary. So it was different, but I think once I got hurt, my faith in everything in God and that aspect is a lot stronger than it was back when I first came into the league. And I just think that whenever I look at my injury, I look at it as a positive thing, and it's allowed me to do so much more. I've gotten to show that I can coach and help the guys out and do the things that I can do on a mental aspect more than just the physical aspect. I tailgate with the fans before games, and it allows me to connect more with the fan base in Calgary. It's allowed me to do just more things like that I think increase my value, not just as a football player, but as a person in the community.
So you mentioned helping out with the coaching, and that would, of course, be offensive coordinator Dave Dickinson. Receivers coach Pete Costanza is there. When you do happen to move on from the game of football, and we hope that's no time soon, but when that time comes, do you feel like you could or you will want to be a coach?
Yes, that's something I've always wanted to do since I was little. I think that's always been my dream, was to coach. I never thought of it. It was really a reality for me to play professional football. And I guess that's just due to the circumstances of where I come from. And nobody ever playing professional football from there and things like that, small town. And, I've always wanted to coach. And I feel like playing is just a bonus. And I've been able to be around a lot of great minds as Dave Dickinson, John Huffnagel, George Cortez, Steve Verrado, and some other great offensive coordinators that I've been around, and I think it's allowed me to grow and help me in the coaching aspect. So I've talked to Dave, I've talked to Pete Costanza, and they know my plans of coaching once I'm done.
So with the injury, and I mentioned the next man up thing, the team has lost Dimitri Sumpas, yourself, and other players. Talk about the job John Huffnagel has done, and even John Murphy, and the job that they have done to recruit players to step up and fill in for the injuries that have come about.
It's every year we come to training camp, nobody has a job. Everybody has to come in and earn a job, and I think that's the way it should be. And when you come out and compete every day for a job, and it just shows you the depth that we have. And we have very competitive training camps. John Murphy and Huff and the rest of the coaches, they do a great job of bringing in great talent. And, it's just a part of getting your opportunity. And when teams get that, when players get that opportunity to play, they just have to make the best of the opportunity. And we've had guys this year that's done that.
Of course, the big thing going on here with the Calgary Stampeders is a developing rivalry, and it has developed ever since Henry Burris first came over from the Saskatchewan Roughriders to the Calgary Stampeders. And the talk this past week, and even in past weeks before, has been the running backs. That is John Cornish against Corey Sheets. And it's a huge debate now of whether who's better, and it's on TSN and all that kind of thing. And I just wanted to get your perspective. What do you feel that John Cornish does differently that would elevate him above Corey Sheets in a head-to-head competition?
Well, first of all, they're two great backs. I think they're two different style backs. John's a little bigger, but John might actually be faster than Corey Sheets. I don't think Corey Sheets takes 50, 60-yard runs to the house like John Cornish does. But John's a bigger bruising back, but has the ability to take it the distance. And Corey Sheets makes some great cuts, and he's a very patient back that allows him to stay behind his blocks and make great runs. But overall, I think John's a better back. If you look at the stats, his yards per carry is higher, and look what he's done. And teams always, you go and certain players on certain teams, and defenses always tell you our goal is to stop you and stop John Cornish, and they still can't do it. And John Cornish is out there right now, and I'm not out there, and he's still getting these yards. He's had He's had over 300 yards or 250 yards in the last two games, or 350 yards in the last two games. So, hey, I don't see anybody else doing that in the CFL.
Already over his season last year where he rushed for a Canadian running back record of 1,457 yards. He's currently at 1,545 with 3 games to play. And you mentioned the yards per carry. He has 36 less carries than Corey Sheets does on the season, and yet still well over 100 yards more, despite the injury to Corey Sheets. I mean, Cornish does not have the amount of touches that he has, and I think it's a true testament to the offensive line that you guys have there with the Calgary Stampeders and how they allow John to, break free and get into open space and be able to take off these massive runs. And I think it goes back to John Hufnagel and the job that he does and the job that the offensive line does. So I think it's truly enjoyable to watch each week what John Cornish is going to do and what Corey Sheets is going to do, and perhaps when we come up here in November and a potential Western Division final in Calgary. So another guy I wanted to talk to you about, I believe you refer to him as Agent K, and that would be, of course, Kevin Glenn. And the job that he has done, he doesn't come in as the starting quarterback outright. He has to get it from Drew Tate last year. Drew Tate, of course, got injured, so he did step in and he filled in tremendously for you guys and helped lead you to the Grey Cup. Talk about the job that Kevin Glenn does each week, even if he doesn't happen to be starting in that particular game.
I've been here 10 years, and I've caught a ball from, I think, like 22 quarterbacks and I think 11 different starters. And I will say that Kevin Glenn is my favorite quarterback of all the quarterbacks that I've had the pleasure to catch a ball from. And I think it has to do with nobody gives him a lot of respect. And I thought about it, and he's got the highest winning percentage right now in the last 2 years at quarterback. And you look at it, our defense is better than what Winnipeg's defense was or what Hamilton's defense was when he was there. But if you look at his career, he's slowly putting together a great career. I think he's in the top 10 in CFL history, if I'm not mistaken, in yards passing. And when I'm around him every day, day in, day out, I see his greatness. And, people always labeled him as the quarterback that doesn't really win, but ever since he's been here, that's all he's done. Every time he's got an opportunity, I believe we have the best chance to win. And I've enjoyed playing alongside Kevin Glenn, and I hope I can finish my career out alongside Kevin Glenn.
Getting back to that Calgary-Saskatchewan rivalry just here quickly, what from your aspect, being on the field or even now just watching while you were injured, what is your favorite part of this rivalry?
I think it's just the fans. The fans get involved in rivalries. I think the fans create the rivalries. And, when you call a game a rivalry, you always know it's going to be a pretty good game or a really good game. There's very rarely a blowout. We've been in Saskatchewan and been up like 25-4 at halftime and won the game 28-25 or something like that. So it's always going to be a good game. Coming back when we were down 17 last year and coming back in the fourth quarter in the last 9 minutes of the game. So I think it's just the atmosphere is just a great atmosphere. I think the fans really get behind it. And, Saskatchewan hates to lose to Calgary, and we hate to lose to them. So I think it just produces a great atmosphere.
Speaking with Nik Lewis, the standout receiver of the Calgary Stampeders, you can follow him on Twitter at Nikel18. That's Nikel 18. When I browse your Twitter, aside from the CFL stuff and whatever else you do, I noticed that you're big into the other sports leagues, and that would be college football, the MLB, the NFL, and your Texas Longhorns had the huge win in the Red River rivalry there with Oklahoma. Talk about your other sports and your watching of them and how you relate it to perhaps your job as a professional athlete.
Well, I just have respect for all different athletes. I know the dedication it takes, and I see the greatness in players and people, and I think that's the best part is when you can watch a certain player take over a game or watch a team dominate like the Broncos have done or like, so many great players will take over a game in a key situation, and to watch that greatness, I think it's amazing. I watch playoff baseball. I watch playoff hockey. I'm a huge fan of the UFC. I watch every event that I can if we don't have a game. So I enjoy other sports, and I just enjoy watching them. And, every time I would go see my dad, that's all that would be on TV was sports. Well, no matter if it's golf or anything else, we watch sports. So I think that's just a part of the way I grew up and what I love to do.
Now, I think one of the most polarizing figures in the NFL is, of course, the starting quarterback for your favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys. And recently against the Denver Broncos, he threw for over 500 yards and unfortunately had the late-game interception that got him a lot of attention in the media. And, they're slagging on him, even though he had the highest amount of passing yards in a single game in Cowboys history. From your perspective, how do you like Tony Romo as the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys?
First of all, he's 0-6 in games where he's thrown over 400 yards. And I think that they throw the ball entirely too much. They didn't run the ball in the fourth quarter at all, not one time. I think Tony Romo is a great quarterback. I try to break it down to the fans or to my family and friends. Last year, the interception against Washington, the defensive end made a great play. But in no big and blitz pickup scheme are you ever going to leave the middle linebacker run free up the middle. It forces the quarterback to make a quick decision and usually a bad decision. So I don't think you can always just put it on the quarterback. If you understand football and if you respect the game and you know the game, like I think that I do, and I understand these different nuances of the game, I think it's just that. He threw an interception. He had pressure in his face. He made a bad throw. The defensive player made a great catch. It's a linebacker making a diving catch on an out route. So I think everything just came together at that one time for the defense. And, they get paid, too, to make great plays. If Peyton Manning throws that same interception, nobody says anything. And nobody said anything if the Cowboys win that game about Peyton's interception in the third quarter, fourth quarter, whatever that was. So I just think Tony just has to continue to be Tony. If you're a fan of the Cowboys, just be a fan of the Cowboys. You can't be a fan for 4.5 quarters and then talk about you hate the man who you're just praising. So just be a fan.
And finally, before I let you head on off here, just wanted to talk about the two kickers on the Calgary Stampeders and how they bring a huge added consistency to the lineup. Recently we've seen kickers miss from 20 yards, from 30 yards. It doesn't matter to see where it's from. Every week we've seen a kicker missing from a range that, they probably shouldn't miss from. And your guy, Rene Paredes, El Matador, as he is referred to, just keeps on going. And Rob Maver, I would think, is the best punter in the game. You have Ricky Schmidt in Saskatchewan, and he just booms the ball. But so much of what he does he kicks it into the end zone. And I always see Rob Maver tweet about how the net yards should be adjusted to factor into that, and I believe that they will be. But just talk about Rene Paredes and Rob Maver and having the confidence and the trust in those guys to do their job, and how much of a huge weight it would lift off of a guy like yourself if you were playing, or even Kevin Glenn or John Hufnagel, knowing that they're going to get their job done every single time.
I think it trickles down from the top. Example, Sandro DeAngelis, when he was here, I think the team atmosphere, and we had a way about ourselves, and you just feel comfortable. His career hadn't been the same since he left here. And you look at a guy like Paradise, I call him Paradise, and you look at a guy like him who got cut by Winnipeg, I think it was last year in training camp, and then he comes here and kicks 92%, I think it was last year, something like that, 92, 93%. I think it just instills the confidence that we're going to get the ball in position. All you got to do is put it through there. And if you don't, it doesn't matter, because we'll be okay, because we have the confidence that we can make enough plays to win games. And when we don't get the job done, we have the confidence in Rob Maver to come in, pin the other team deep, because in the offense, you know how hard it is to go 100 yards, 100-plus yards every drive in order to try to score a touchdown. You know, when you're getting 300 and 400 yards a game, you know, you usually don't get that in one drive. So we understand the differences in the game, and when Maver can pin people deep, it gives us a great chance to win. And when Paradise can knock down field goals, it helps us in offense, because, you know, you don't always finish your drives like you want to, but it allows us to stay on top and to put pressure on other teams to score points.
Perennial all-star receiver Nik Lewis for the first place in the West Division Calgary Stampeders. Nick, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
And good luck with rehabbing your injury, and I hope to see you back out there pretty soon.
Thank you, sir.
There he is, Nik Lewis, one of my favorite players to watch week in and week out when he is on the field. Of course, as you know, he unfortunately is sidelined at the moment, but you know that he will be back running over defensive backs, linebackers, whatnot in the near future, and we can't wait to see him back out there. So just getting back to the week here, week 16 it is, only 3 more weeks to go in what has been a very crazy Canadian Football League season, from, you know, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers struggles all the way up to the fight for first place, and likely now second place, as Calgary seems to have first place locked up, although there is opportunity for the Saskatchewan Roughriders to get back in the thick of things if they are able to defeat the BC Lions. Then they go to Calgary to play those Stampeders, and, you know, maybe we'll see something come about there, but it would seem that Calgary does have things on lockdown for the West Division final. Saskatchewan and BC, as I mentioned, they do play this upcoming week. If Saskatchewan does defeat the BC Lions, they win the season series, they clinch second place, they will get that home playoff berth against what will be the BC Lions in November. And I believe, if my head is correct here, November 10th is the first round of the playoffs there, coming up here the day before Remembrance Day in a couple of weeks. The BC Lions, Calgary Stampeders, they met this past week. It was a chance for BC to get back into a chance to perhaps chase down the Calgary Stampeders, but they did come up on the losing side. The game was tied. Calgary took the lead, and then the young quarterback, Thomas DeMarco, we talked about it before, how he didn't make mistakes in the game against Saskatchewan when they went into Regina and beat the Riders. He made a mistake. He threw a pick six to Chris Randall, 65 yards, and that sealed up the game there. 40-26, the Calgary Stampeders beat the BC Lions. Thomas DeMarco, that was his only mistake, his only turnover of the game. And of course, as we were talking about with Nik Lewis and Tony Romo of the Dallas Cowboys, he had a great game, but he threw the turnover and it wound up costing him. But that's the way it goes, right? In a close game, if you turn the ball over, if you make that mistake, it's going to hurt you in the long run, as it did for Thomas DeMarco and the BC Lions. The Saskatchewan Roughriders, they pulled out a squeaker, 5-point win over the Edmonton Eskimos at home. 14-9 was the score. They did not score a single point in the second half, but it was enough against a very struggling Edmonton Eskimos team in 2013, and their playoff hopes are pretty much all but shattered. In fact, they are shattered because they cannot catch the Montreal Alouettes, even though they can tie them in the standings. They cannot pass them because you do have to be one win ahead, or at least 1 point if it's a tie, ahead of the East Division team if you are trying to cross over, and that is not the case for the Edmonton Eskimos, so they were the first team eliminated in the playoff race. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are quickly behind them, rather. They are 3 games back at the Montreal Alouettes, but if they are able to win out, and it's kind of a stretch, I mean, they do play the Toronto Argonauts twice here coming up, but if they are able to win out and Montreal loses out, it would be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in shocking fashion taking that final seed in the East Division. And Toronto and Hamilton, 2 weeks ago, Toronto was a game away from clinching first place in the East Division. They had Hamilton back-to-back. They win one, they're in great shape, they win the East Division. Didn't happen. Back-to-back weeks, the Hamilton Tiger Cats on the road and then at home, they clipped the Toronto Argonauts 2 straight games. Now they're only 1 game back for the division lead. How about that? You thought Hamilton was down and out 2 weeks ago. That's all it was. They were down and out. Toronto was going to soar to this East Division, soar to first place, have that bye, and host the East Division final for the first time since 2005. Not quite yet, say the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as they are just 1 game back. Now, again, just mentioned it, Winnipeg, they do play Toronto in the final, or in the next 2 weeks here. First is in Winnipeg and then in Toronto, but, no slight to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but in all likelihood, Toronto's going to win at least one of those games, and that pretty much would do in the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They're going to have to beat the Montreal Alouettes twice, and then the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the final week when Toronto plays the Montreal Alouettes. So, we'll see. Winnipeg, they beat Montreal. Montreal, of course, isn't as good of a team as the Toronto Argonauts, but if Winnipeg wants to have some pride, have some enthusiasm here to make something happen, even though they're likely not going to be in the playoffs, why not beat the first place team in the division 2 straight weeks? Why not get up for those 2 games? Why not show what you can do and make good signs going forward with Tim Burke, the head coach, maybe not the head coach next season, but, Kyle Walters likely strong GM candidate with the moves that he has made. Winnipeg Blue Bombers a chance to make some noise and help out their cause moving forward, looking at the future. In that game, Winnipeg 34, Montreal 27. Montreal turned the ball over 7 times. And you're never going to win a football game, or at least never win a football game very consistently when you're turning over the football 7 times as they did. Josh Nieswander, the starting quarterback, threw 3 interceptions. He was 50% passing, 19 of 38 for 199 yards. Backup quarterback Troy Smith came in the game. He turned the ball over once, threw a touchdown, his first career passing touchdown in the Canadian Football League, and sounds like he's going to get the start here coming up this week against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, so it'll be interesting to see what he does. And a guy like Troy Smith, he brings an interesting aspect to the game. He can get the ball out quickly, as you saw in the game. He has a strong arm, and that was one of the things that a lot of people talked about when he was coming out of college, was his arm strength and his ability to gun the football and get it out quickly and get it to his receivers. Also his playmaking ability. He can take off, he can run, he can pick up a few yards if need be, and that's one of the big things that you look at when you're talking about Troy Smith and his scouting evaluation when he was coming out of the Ohio State University a few years ago, heading towards the NFL when he was a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. On the flip side, you had Max Hall, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers starting quarterback once again. He was 16 of 27 for 223 yards, 2 touchdowns. But again, we mentioned it. The biggest thing is he didn't throw an interception. He did fumble one time, but he limited his turnovers, and that's what you have to do to win a football game, and that's something the Winnipeg Blue Bombers simply have not done this season. They did it this past week, and it resulted in a win. So, again, they're likely not going to be in the playoffs. They have to win out. Montreal has to lose out. But going forward, Max Hall, this could be his chance. Chances are, all things being equal, that they're going to be looking elsewhere for a quarterback spot. But if he can make his progressions, make his reads throwing the football, not turn the ball over, get 1, maybe 2 wins here down in the final 3 games, they're going to look at him and perhaps say, hey, that's a guy who battled through some difficulties. We had 3 wins. He was able to get us a couple more. Maybe we want to give him a bigger shot and a bigger look at being our starting quarterback going forward. And so it's a big opportunity for Max Hall to do something for himself, not only in these final 3 games, but also long-term heading towards 2014, as mentioned. And, again, you have Ottawa coming back into the league. Maybe they look at him as a backup to whoever they take, Zach Collaros, Bo Levi Mitchell, Kevin Glenn, whoever they look at. Maybe they look at a guy like Max Hall if he's able to play consistently here in the final 3 weeks. One guy for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, though, that I wanted to mention here, Will Ford. The ability of Will Ford in the past couple of weeks, and the past few weeks, and he had a kick return even when Chad Simpson was healthy earlier this season. The ability of Will Ford to just go. You've seen he had a 69-yard carry in the game that got down to the 1-yard line. He had 6 carries for 5 yards previous to that. And he rips off the 69-yard carry to the 1-yard line, gets some life into the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and we've seen it before. He had a 70-yard run, I believe it was, a couple of weeks ago, and he's just been this guy who's consistently doing his job. He wants to keep his job, and these are the things you look for when you have 3 wins and you're not in an avid playoff hunt. You look for the guys who are going to do what it takes to win, no matter the circumstance. That's what you look for. And this is why, even though you have 3 wins, like the Edmonton Eskimos who are now out of the playoffs, this is what you look for. You look for these guys who are going to make a difference, and the guys that, they're not going to give up. They're going to fight. They're going to keep trying to win those games. They're going to keep going for that extra yard. They're not going to give up. And those are the kinds of guys you want on your football team when you are winning. You want to reward them with that. And so Will Ford is one of those guys who the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to probably look at and say, hey, yeah, we want you back next season. We don't want you to go to Ottawa. Maybe we'll protect you. Chad Simpson is a great running back. He's dealing with an injury, but maybe they look for Will Ford and not Chad Simpson and protecting him from the Ottawa Red Blacks. And the final game of the week, of course, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as I mentioned, defeated the Toronto Argonauts 24-18. Ricky Ray, his first game back from injury. He threw his first interception. It was kind of just a toss-up, looking for something in the end zone at the end of the game there. But he was okay. He wasn't his normal self. He was 26 of 34 for 303 yards, 2 touchdowns. But it wasn't the greatness that we saw earlier in the season when he was just going out there and slinging it and moving the football with ease. And that's a credit to the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the defense and the defensive job that Orlando Steinhauer has done to turn this ship around when everybody was looking at them and thinking, what is going on with the Hamilton Tiger Cats? Earlier in the season when they were allowing so many yards, so many points, and now, look at them now. Here they come. They're rolling towards November here, and, they're getting things done, and we'll see if they're able to keep up that defensive performance going forward. But again, they're blitzing the quarterback, and that's what you have to do. You have to get pressure on the quarterback, and you have to be able to make a big difference any way you can if things aren't going well. And they have turned it around in a way that is really incredible when you look at how much they struggled earlier in the season and last year with the defense with Casey Crehan, who is now in Winnipeg. And, just a remarkable job by Orlando Steinhauer. And offensively, the running back, C.J. Gable, he continues to get it done. He had 5 receptions in the game for 46 yards, 17 carries for 118 yards and a touchdown. And with the injury to Greg Ellingson, one of the standout rookies of the Hamilton Tiger Cats, it's now looking like maybe C.J. Gable is going to run away with this Rookie of the Year award. Perhaps that might be the case. Of course, you have Mike Edom, the great non-import safety of the Montreal Alouettes. You have the center for the Calgary Stampeders, Brett Jones. He has done a good job maintaining that consistency along the offensive line in Calgary, allowing John Cornish to rip off these yards, to rip off over 1,500 yards and likely, close to 2,000 yards. I don't think he's going to get there. It might happen. You never know. But I think it's more likely he'll finish at about 1,750 to 1,800 yards, somewhere in there. And speaking of leaders, you look at a guy like Fred Stamps, S.J. Green. They're the 1-2 receivers in the Canadian Football League right now. Fred Stamps has over 1,100 yards, 1,127 yards to be exact, on a 3-win team, the first team eliminated from the playoffs, and yet he leads the league in receiving. And that's the kind of thing you look for. We know about Fred Stamps. We know how great of a receiver he is. We know the veteran leadership he can provide to the Edmonton Eskimos. But to see something like that happen, and to see a guy who's on a bottom-feeding team lead the league in a category is truly amazing to me. And then you have S.J. Green, who has rotated through Anthony Calvillo, Josh Nieswander, Tanner Marsh, Troy Smith's getting reps now, and likely a start coming up this week. That's 4 different quarterbacks. And yet he's second in the league in receiving, and that's truly a staple to the consistency of S.J. Green and how much he has stepped up in place of the injured Jamel Richardson. And third, you had Chris Getzlaff again, a guy that you maybe not would consider to be a leading receiver in Saskatchewan, with Weston Dressler there, with G. Simon there, but there he is. He's bounced back from a season last year where he dropped so many passes. Even though he still had over 1,000 yards, he dropped passes at times, unfortunate sequences, and it led to a little bit of flagging for Chris Getzlaff, but he's bounced back nicely for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then fourth, you look at a guy. Who is it? Nick Moore of the BC Lions. And who has he replaced? G. Simon. And you're replacing a Hall of Fame receiver. You're fourth in the league in receiving. And again, a true testament to a guy's ability to go out there and get things done when you're filling in for either an injury, as S.J. Green has with Jamel Richardson, even though he is a talented receiver, or a guy who has departed and has had a stable of consistency, as was the case with G. Simon with the BC Lions and Nick Moore, the job that he has done to step up. And then fifth is Bakari Grant, and he's a guy who's come up over the past couple of years, and he's starting to gain more attention in that Hamilton offense, and Henry Burris has helped him out so much with getting to be fifth in the league in receiving at the moment. And, they have Andy Fantuz, they have Greg Ellingson, they have Dave Stalla, who doesn't see as much time anymore, but they have Andrea Jones, they have very talented receivers, but it's Bakari Grant who has come from the bottom and slowly worked his way up, who now leads the Hamilton Tiger Cats in receiving. And speaking of Henry Burris, the only guy, actually Mike Riley has started every single game too, but Henry Burris, he started every single game for the Hamilton Tiger Cats the past 2 seasons since coming over from the Calgary Stampeders, and he's been a guy who has been healthy his entire career. Missed a few games here and there, but overall his consistency to be in the lineup has helped so much for his case and so much for the case of his team, whether it's in Hamilton, Calgary, or even Saskatchewan years ago, and he leads the league in receiving with 4,523 yards, and nobody is anywhere close to him because nobody else can stay healthy or nobody else can put together a consistent enough game to be able to stay in the game. You have Darian Durant, who is second. He's had a couple of injury woes. You have Mike Riley, who's third. He's been injured and earlier in the season wasn't performing as well, with the new offensive line having some troubles. Fourth is Travis Lulay, again, injured. Thomas DeMarco's the starter there right now, although Travis Lulay may be looking to get back. And then fifth, Kevin Glenn, Agent K, of course, as Nik Lewis refers to him as getting the job done there. He doesn't start every game, but when he does, he knows what to do. And this upcoming week here, we mentioned Saskatchewan, BC, and the big game that's going to take place in Regina, a battle for second place. But, the other games that you're looking at here, you have the Montreal Alouettes. They're going to be hosting the Hamilton Tiger Cats. That'll be the final game of the week on Sunday. Saturday doubleheader. First up is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Toronto Argonauts. Winnipeg will host that game at Investors Group Field, looking to knock down the Toronto Argonauts a little bit more and help out. Well, not help out. I don't know if you want to help out a divisional foe, but looking for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They're looking for Winnipeg to help them out, if you put it from that perspective, and beat the Toronto Argonauts on Saturday afternoon. Of course, as mentioned, the game after that will be the Saskatchewan Roughriders and the BC Lions. But first, the first game of the week will be the Battle of Alberta, the Edmonton Eskimos hosting the Calgary Stampeders, and that'll go Friday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern will be the start time for that game. So, We're going to have Kent Ridley coming on here in probably about 5 to 10 minutes, I believe, is when we're going to get started with him. Some interesting things in the CIS going on. Of course, the playoffs are winding down. The OUA will have their final games of the regular season this upcoming week here. Western, Guelph, Queens, all looking for that bye, and it's going to be Guelph against Queens. The winner take all for that second seed. We say second seed, it's likely second seed. It's not guaranteed because Western does play York, but the chances of Western losing to York probably aren't that good. So we're going to go ahead and say that Western will be first, and the winner of this game will battle it out for that second seed. Another interesting topic we're going to talk about with Kent, Laval. The Laval Rouge, they have been a staple of consistency in the CIS and in the Quebec Conference. And, what if, get this, what if they were in the OUA? What would happen? And Kent's going to answer that question. What would happen if Laval moved to the Ontario Conference? We're not saying it's going to happen. Obviously they're in the Quebec Conference, but what if the CIS said, hey, let's shake things up a little bit here. Let's move Laval into the OUA. Let's reform another division, maybe move, like York or somebody else, and rebrand the entire conference, and kind of similar to something like the NHL has done. What if that was the case? What would happen? We're going to talk to Kent Ridley about that, as well as the Heck Crichton quarterbacks. Which quarterback would you take in a must-win game? That'll be an interesting topic, and a couple other things here. But I believe he is on the line now. And Kent Ridley of Ridley Scouting, SportsEh, pretty much you name it, you got him. It's Kent Ridley. He knows football better than most people. You know him, I know him. Here he is. Kent, how are you doing?
Doing great tonight. How about yourself?
I am doing quite well. Just had on Nik Lewis a few minutes ago. He provided us with some great content tonight, so I was pretty happy and excited to know that he was going to be joining me tonight.
Nick is a great guy there. I had the chance to meet up with him a few times in Calgary, and he's fantastic. And the work that he's doing with some high school kids down in Texas, he doesn't always brag about himself. In the new calmer and a little more gentler Nik Lewis, but it needs to be mentioned that he's got a bunch of kids that he's working with in Texas, and I believe 3 of them already have gone Div 1, and I think the next are all looking at scholarship offers there too. So kudos to you, Nick.
Really outstanding to see these professional athletes do that kind of thing. But as I was mentioning, Laval, Ontario Conference. We know they're the 10-time defending champions of the RSEQ, the Quebec Conference in the CIS. There was an article on SportsEh a few weeks ago about Laval moving into the OUA and what would happen if that was the case. And I emailed you. I wanted to see if you had a big take on this, and you do. So just go ahead, blast it away, fire away. What is your take on Laval and how they would do in the Ontario Conference?
Well, first off, I think there's a lot of people that are kind of chomping at the bit to see a little bit of realignment in the CIS. That hasn't happened since 2001 when Ottawa and Queens moved out of the kind of mixture league that was Ontario and Quebec and came back to Ontario. And so I think kind of people, you know how it is, you get a little restless with the same old and the same old every week. And so I think there's a lot of individuals that would love to see Laval playing, schools like Western and Queens during the regular season instead of waiting all the way till the bowls or the Vanier Cup. And as much as that's a possibility in the future, and I would love to see a game that mattered, but not in November. A September game that mattered between those kind of schools. Overall, I think Laval would be a very strong addition to the OUA, especially if everything that they are currently doing, they were allowed to continue doing. There are quite a few differences, between the Quebec League and the Ontario League. Your biggest thing is, first off, it's looking at scholarships. in the OUA, if you're an incoming freshman, you have to be over that 80% to get any scholarship money. And the rules are a little different in Quebec. You have to be coming in with a good grade, of course, but maybe not necessarily that high mark to get your scholarship. And I think you're pulling from a different pool in Quebec. Pulling guys out of a CJEP system. They tend to be a year or 2 years older than the kids that the OUA schools are bringing in. And so Laval's really been able to reload. And so I think keeping that in mind, kind of the outcome I got from the article written was that Laval would be, a 4th or 5th place team in the OUA, whereas I believe that they would probably be a top 2 most years and fighting with your Westerns and your Queens and your McMasters for that top spot every year. I don't think changing their regular opponents is going to change that result. I think the team is very steady. They've got the biggest coaching staff in the CIS. They're well prepared and ready to go each week, and I think that would still translate into an OUA season.
So you mentioned the former conference mixture of the Ontario and Quebec conferences, and of course you do have out of conference schedules, but it seems to be only one game per year. I believe Laval has played Acadia earlier this season. Is there any opportunity you think where they could, maybe not realign the conferences, but more so give Laval an Ontario conference team, maybe even a Canada West team every year, or is that something that funding may not necessarily allow?
Yeah, I think that's where the biggest hurdle is they need to have some way to create some source of revenue for those kind of games. There's got to be something. It's really difficult for me sometimes in dealing with this topic because I grew up like yourself in Canada West area, where you've got your UBC Thunderbirds that have to fly to 3 of their opponents, and really it doesn't make any sense to drive to Calgary or Edmonton either. So pretty much their travel budget has to be way larger than, say, a Wilfrid Laurier or University of Toronto school. And so every time I hear that debate about, the cost of travel is so high, it's like, no, really, quite honestly, the Canada West schools do it every year just for their regular season schedule. Forget, an inter-conference matchup. We've got a situation where most of the Canada West schools have to fly to at least half of their opponents, just for a matter of saving time and instead of spending 3 days on a bus kind of thing. And so I think that if the Eastern schools could kind of, be okay with that big bump up in what would be their budget, that it could happen, earlier than say, how it's kind of trudging along right now. I do believe it'll happen in the future. I'm a big proponent of a 10-game CIS schedule, a setup where you've got 8 games in conference and then 2 non-conference games that kind of work into it. But I also know that some of the schools with their current budget, that wouldn't be possible. And so because of that, I'd hate to see a school drop football because just to add, kind of these, they are glorified exhibition games, really, the non-conference games. The advantage is you really do get to see the strongest schools before you get to the playoffs. But I look at a school like Waterloo with their budget for football, and I would hate to sacrifice a school just in the name of adding interleague play.
Now, in a hypothetical situation where they do add non-conference games, what would the standings in the playoffs look like? Like, would we develop towards an NCAA system here where it's rankings that would rule at the end of the day, or is it going to mostly still be your conference games that get you through the playoffs, you play your conference schedule?
I think we would probably end up into a playoff format that would be similar to the FCS setup. Not really like a true bowl system like the FBS, but the FCS, they take the top 16 schools and they take they give the extra credence to a school winning their conference. That's kind of priority. And then after that, then they take wild cards based on their overall record. The thing that it would change, really, for most schools, would be it would change the conference playoffs from their current format. Like Canada West, top 4 go on. OUA, they keep tinkering, but usually it's top 8 go on. And so it would kind of change that format and probably end up with top 2 or division leaders at least going against each other for a conference championship and kind of speeding up that process. I would love to see a CIS, top 8 playoff format, or at the very minimum, really right now, kind of our best option would be to just completely merge the AUS and the Q, put them together because that makes up 10 schools, and then have 3 conference champions and then a wild card every year, and just go into a top 4 kind of setup.
So switching gears a little bit here, the Hat Crichton Trophy, and for the past 6 years, quarterbacks have won the last 6 Het Crichton trophies. If you had to pick right now, 2 weeks before the playoffs start, who would be your leading candidate, and perhaps another couple of guys who might be able to challenge that guy?
Oh, that is a tough one, especially with the track record of being an offense-dominated trophy, being a quarterback-dominated trophy. Pretty much your leader on the quarterback side of things would have to be a guy like Will Finch coming out of Western. He's got 2,500 yards passing exactly, which is pretty cool. But he's got a 70.4 passing percentage, kind of Ricky Ray numbers, and his touchdown interception ratio is 18-3. Phenomenal numbers from the young man. He's definitely my leader at this point. Kind of an underdog in the quarterback side of things would be Jordan Heather. And it's not often that a Bishops player gets named into this kind of conversation, but right now he's leading the CIS in yards per game average, averaging 363.8 yards per game. For a very tough out, to talk about Bishops, they could just pull a major upset this year, the way they're playing. They're in every game, and a lot of that has to do with Jordan Heather for sure. Kind of my other dark horse in the setup coming out of the Canada West would be Mercer Timmis, having just a monster year with 14 rushing touchdowns already, plus a receiving touchdown. Just outstanding. He's pretty much on pace. He should end up somewhere around 1,100 yards rushing this year. And if it wasn't for taking him out early in a couple games, he might already be a 1,000-yard rusher. So those would be my top 3 right now. And kind of the interesting thing to me this year when I was, looking through stats and trying to find a leader to come out of the Atlantic, and I really couldn't find, that outstanding offensive player. But on the defensive side of things, you got a guy like Rob Dubenfield, who's already leading the CIS with 9 sacks in 6 games. And so maybe it's time for a defensive player to get noticed out of there.
So you mentioned Will Finch, and if it is Will Finch winning from the Western Mustangs, he would be the first Western player to win since Hamilton Tiger Cats receiver Andy Fantuz won the Het Crichton Trophy. So this next question kind of ties back into that a little bit with the quarterback-dominated award that is the Het Crichton Trophy, and that is, if you had to pick one quarterback, and it's a must-win game, we'll say it's the Vanier Cup, which quarterback that is currently in the CIS, which quarterback would you take to be your guy to lead into battle?
These are tough questions you're throwing at me tonight, Tyler. I guess based on the body of work this year, my guy would be Will Finch. He was my top quarterback coming out of high school in Canada a couple of years ago. Just a solid player, and I think he's really developing the tools to really move forward and be a dominant player, not just a steady, reliable guy. Looking at his passing percentage, it's kind of reminiscent of a Ricky Ray type passer. He's an accurate guy. Controls the game very well. He's definitely a guy that I'd like to go in there and game plan with. Setting up the offense, and I believe that he's one that you can put in there and go, here's our situation, here's the play, and he would just, make it work. But of course, I always have to have two outside guys on my radar. One is in your backyard in Regina, in Cayman Shutter, and the reason why I pick him is because he's kind of a wild card. He's got the tools. He's never had, a full year of showing it off that he can do it. But he's got the tools there. I think he's kind of the boom or bust kind of player. I think if you were going into a big game like a Vanier, he would either be a 500-yard guy or a 150-yard guy that game. I don't think he's got much middle ground. I think he's just boom or bust. And my third pick would be kind of the Hart Award. One of those quarterbacks, hardworking, always ready, but he just hasn't had a proper opportunity to show it. And that would be Carleton quarterback Jesse Mills. He's another guy that I was very high on coming out of high school, and just a kid. He's all heart. He's all preparation. And one of these years he's going to put it together, and it's going to be look out there coming out of Carleton, those Ravens.
Kent Ridley, RidleyScouting.com, at Ridley Scouting on Twitter, talking CIS with me tonight. So in recapping this past week, there wasn't a whole lot of games. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and we're running down to the end of the season, so it's a little bit of a split. And the big game that interested me, and I mean, it wasn't really an interesting week. For the most part, games were blowouts, but there was one game here. It was a rematch. It was the second half of the home-and-home between St. Mary's and Acadia in the Atlantic Conference, and for the second straight week, St. Mary's beat Acadia. They beat Acadia 11-9 in this game. Acadia is back-to-back champions in the Atlantic Conference. Is it any surprising to you that they're looking like perhaps they're not going to repeat again here, and somebody else is going to get it? And is it a surprise that St. Mary's got them in back-to-back games like this?
I believe so. It's so incredibly hard to sweep a team when you're facing them twice, and especially at the CIS level. When you're playing them back to back, your preparation is that much higher for that second game. Acadia even had a 9-0 lead at halftime in that game, and really I'll put it out there and bring it back on SportsEh earlier this year. I said these two teams would be in the opposite spot. I said that Acadia would be number one, and St. Mary's would take a rebuilding year with a young team and look out next year, but this year they'd be number 4. And so for me, I'm shocked at kind of how quickly St. Mary's has come together. I think their coaching staff has done a fantastic job to take these guys and they're not necessarily winning with their offense, but their defense is consistent and regular, and their offense is doing just enough to get the work done. And they may not be a Vanier Cup threat right now, but they're definitely a program to watch out for next year. I think if they can put everything together for over the course of an off season, I think we could see some noise coming out of Husky Stadium again.
The other game in the Atlantic Conference, Mount Allison beat St. FX 42-13. Over to the Ontario Conference, Toronto beat York 56-35. Guelph beat Carleton 48-12. Queens hammered Waterloo 78-21. And McMaster were the victors over Laurier 28-5. CIS Top 10 was released yesterday. Western remained at number 1. In fact, there was no change at all in the top 10. Laval 2, Calgary 3, Guelph 4, Queens was 5, Montreal 6, Saskatchewan 7, Bishops 8, McMaster and Windsor rounded out the top 10 at 9 and 10. And Kent, I never got the opportunity to have you on while this was still perhaps a factor. And I know we talked about it in emailing, and that was McMaster still in the top 10 at a 2-3 record. And now we see them at 4-3 here. They have one more game left that they should be able to win. And it seems to me, anyways, that the reason they were number 9 and maintained that top 10 spot was their schedule. Most people figured they'd wind up being 5-3, as it looks like they will be, and have that, that third or fourth spot in the Ontario Conference. It'll be number 4 if that is the case. What was your take on McMaster originally being a below 500 team in the top 10?
I was really shocked with it because of the setup of how they had gone. They were a very strong team at home. They went 3-1 at home. They did a very good job there. But their games against top 10 teams, they went 0-3 in those 3 matches. And for me, that was kind of the red flag situation. The 3 games they won handily. And then the 3 games that they had lost coming into this past weekend, they had lost them. One game was pretty tight, but they had lost them, and it was kind of a situation where they just weren't matching up with the other top 10 school, and so for me it was kind of odd that they were hanging on so tight to that spot, and not dropping off and maybe coming back on here later in the year to come back into that 9 spot. And I guess kind of the way the voters have gone this year is they've really looked at the Atlantic Conference and said, you guys have to show me something more than what you've done. This past week on my ballot, I put in St. Mary's to kind of even that out a little bit. I thought that what they were showing was enough to make it into the top 10, and I was kind of disappointed that they didn't make it into the official list, but we'll keep working on it, I guess. If you're St. Mary's, keep plugging. But so yeah, I was kind of disappointed. The other thing that I was kind of annoyed with a couple of weeks ago, on a personal level, was seeing Montreal lose and yet stay in that number 4 spot. And it wasn't until another week or 2 after that when Guelph finally took that number 4 spot from them, and that was kind of a little bit of a shock too. We knew that they had a very good defense, but usually when you lose, you should be dropping instead of having an undefeated team ranked below you there. So, in the end, most of the time, when you get to the end of the year, the top 10 kind of works its way out. I had one individual this week tell me, he's like, when's the last time a team that was ranked lower than 6th even had a shot at the Vanier Cup? And, you kind of have to concede that point and say, well, that's true. So maybe really we're better off looking at the top 6 and paying attention to that section rather than looking at the full top 10.
Kent Ridley, RidleyScouting.com. You can follow him on Twitter at RidleyScouting. Kent, we're right out of time here, unfortunately. We'd love to talk to you more, as always, but we'll have to let you go here. Thanks again for joining me tonight, and as always, great content brought to us by you.
Thanks so much for having me on, Tyler.
The big game in the CIS upcoming this week, Guelph at Queens, winner take all for that second seed in the OUA. That'll do it tonight. If you want to join a prediction contest in the CFL, I know it's a little bit late. We have 3 weeks left, but you can head over to RougeRadio.com, find the link there for the prediction pool. Get your name in there, make your picks. You'll win some CFL PA sponsored prizes. courtesy of us here at Rouge Radio. So feel free to go ahead on over to rougeradio.com and do that. We'll be back again next week. Not sure who we're going to have on the program, but I'm sure it'll be a great program as always. Nik Lewis, I want to thank him so much. All-star receiver of the Calgary Stampeders. Can't stress that enough. He is a true pro. Thanks to him once again for joining us tonight. Kent Ridley, RidleyScouting.com, SportsEh, top prospects, whatever, you name it, he's there. Kent Ridley, Ridley Scouting. I want to thank him again for joining us. He always brings great content on the CIS, and that'll do it tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me wherever you may be listening, whether it was live or whether you're listening on the podcast, YouTube, TuneIn, you name it, we're there. Rouge Radio is your source for Canadian football. We're going to have a great partnership to announce coming forward here, so stay tuned for that. And you have yourself a good night out there.